In California, it looks like there's water everywhere. The sun, the surf, the California cliché, it's all about water. But a short drive from the coast and the true California emerges. The dusty hills reveal what many here are reluctant to admit, that this is a state living in desert denial, that the great Californian empire is built on the dust of one of the driest places on the continent, and it is quickly running out of water.
This is exactly what I wanted to show you. Here we are in the official delta now. You'll go over railroad tracks and sloughs.
Rita Schmitz-Sudman knows the frightening truth, and she's trying to warn others through her nonprofit group, the Water Education Foundation.
Without the water, we wouldn't have this state. We wouldn't have movies. We wouldn't have wine. We wouldn't have agriculture. We wouldn't have the cities. Okay, so here we have California water.
Okay.
We have water coming down from the north.
Back when she took this job, it was supposed to be a temporary thing. But 27 years later, she knows where every drop of California's water comes from and how close the state is to running out.
In the Sierra Nevada, it's just amazing to look around the West and think, what's going to happen in the future? Are we going to have any agriculture? Will it just be cities? Will we get our food from China? There's lots of things to think about with the water issue.
So the crisis has started.
The crisis is underway.
California has always survived by pumping water all over the map, using almost 20% of its energy to do it. But these days, the state is being squeezed at both ends. In the south, California shares the Colorado River with 7 other parched states. But the river's water level has been shrinking after an 8-year drought that's predicted to get worse with climate change. In the north, there's the Delta, supplying water to over half the state, and the Delta is in trouble too. The Delta is an inland estuary, a network of waterways, where fresh water from the mountains and from 2 rivers meets salt water from the ocean tides. The Pacific tides flow under San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge and travel inland to the Delta, where they constantly threaten to pollute the fresh water. Over the years, a fragile maze of levees has been built. Simple mounds of dirt and old tree branches. For more than a century, they've held up, allowing the fresh water to be pumped throughout the state.
The engineers in the early days did such a fabulous job of moving water around the state that people didn't really think, oh, I can't live in Los Angeles, I can't live in San Diego, there's not enough water there. Nobody really thought too much about the environment.
The Delta is considered more vulnerable than New Orleans was before Hurricane Katrina.
And you can see that the water is actually higher than the ag lands down on the left.
A drive along the levee roads reveals the problem, with much of California's precious drinking water on one side and low-lying farms on the other. Here they talk about the doomsday scenario, the collapse of the precarious system that has sustained California for so long. A single earthquake could shatter the levees and flood the entire area. Climate change could bring rising seas that pollute the fresh water.
You know, it doesn't take much salt to contaminate fresh water. Then you can't drink it. Then you can't use it on your crops.
The California state capitol sits at the Delta's edge. The fate of the Delta has been the talk of Sacramento for years, but they still don't have a plan to save it.
As with many things, people avoid difficult decisions.
Joe Grindstaff is on the political hot seat as Deputy Secretary for Water Policy. He's also in charge of a special agency set up to solve the problems of the Delta.
3.5 years ago, we went to the legislature and said, we really need to address these issues. And we got a warm reception, but nobody really considered spending the kinds of money that we talked about needing. Frankly, New Orleans helped because suddenly everybody said, oh, you guys were serious when you said you really needed to spend this money.
Shocked by the disaster of New Orleans, there was suddenly $4 billion of state money to repair the most fragile levees. So now the simple layers of dirt are being fortified with stone. But a total reconstruction is not possible. For decades, there's been talk of a controversial plan to build a canal around the delicate Delta area, bypassing the levees and sending the water straight on south.
Would that be a much more efficient way to do it, and would that protect the environment more? I think that's something we have to look at as we move ahead.
The reason that the canals have been stymied is that the people in the San Francisco Bay and the Delta area have been very suspicious. Why should they protect the water if it's just going to go south to Central and Southern California? And you know, the history of California and the West is about great water fights.
As if the water politics were not already complicated enough, now there's a new player, a tiny endangered fish called the Delta smelt. Thanks to this little fish, much of Southern California is going to be short of water this year. Because when they pump water, they also pump fish. And the Delta is home to several unique and threatened species. The pumping stations try to stop the fish from going downstream by using a series of grates. They catch the fish in a giant bucket and return them to the Delta. But environmentalists said that wasn't enough to save the Delta smelt. A federal court agreed, and in a landmark ruling, ordered the Delta to cut its water flows by a third.
This has had huge reverberation to farmers in the Central Valley, which grow the early lettuce that you all enjoy on your salads. And it has had a huge reverberation to the cities of, say, Los Angeles, to San Diego, Santa Barbara.
Some of the largest cities in the world are getting up a third to a half less water to save a 3-inch fish.
Have you ever heard of the canary in the coal mine? That's what the environmentalists say, and that's what the courts are agreeing with them. That's what that 3-inch fish in the Delta is. It's the canary in the coal mine.
So added up, California is basically running out of water. One of the first places to suffer from the water restrictions that could become common on a warmer planet. So as California goes, so may well go much of the rest of the world. It's a test case here. More people than live in all of Canada, not nearly enough water to go around, and no one with a clear idea of what to do. The fighting has already started, and the people who live near the bottom of the water chain are already being forced to adjust.
Long Beach, California, just south of Los Angeles, it's a city that's about to get thirsty. Much of its water comes from the Delta or the Colorado River. So adding up the effects of drought, climate change, and the Delta smelt, they're preparing for the worst.
We didn't have any choice.
Kevin Wadier is the general manager of the Long Beach Water Department.
It's almost impossible that we'll ever be in a situation again where we have full supplies from the Colorado River. So this is forever.
So what does that mean here on the ground?
Well, you know, I think it means we absolutely have to do a better job of conserving. We waste a lot of water in California. Let's be honest with ourselves. We waste a lot of water.
Inside their homes, Californians are already very efficient, using low-flow toilets and taps, a legacy of past droughts. But outside, they're water gluttons. Over half of the household water is used trying to grow grass in the desert. To set an example, Wattier changed his own front lawn to AstroTurf. Long Beach has also imposed strict rules on outdoor water use. Water wasters show up on YouTube or local cable, captured by water vigilantes using cell phone cameras. So far, residents here have been embarrassed into cutting water use by 8%, but that's not nearly enough.
We're getting ready this summer to probably have the first shortage we've had here in Southern California since 1991. I think we're going to have some shortages to get people's attention. I don't think most people believe it, to be honest with you. People turn on the tap and water comes out. To most people, that's all they know. Until we have some shortages and some rationing, I think we're not going to have the lifestyle changes we need to have.
Long Beach keeps growing, putting officials under pressure to find water for all those houses. And with the ocean lapping at its shore, they've started to wonder why they can't drink the sea. They can. It's called desalination. Already there are proposals for up to 20 plants along the coast. But it's not as simple as it sounds. It takes enormous energy to turn seawater into drinking water. Long Beach is searching for a better way. In this pilot plant, they're experimenting with a more efficient method to force the water through the salt-trapping membrane.
Our goal here, and I think we can get there with this project, is to achieve the same amount of energy consumption here to produce water as currently required to bring it from Northern California down here. And so we've closed that gap more than halfway, and our goal is to get it down so that we're not a net increase of greenhouse gas compared to bringing the water down from the north.
Desalination also has environmental impacts on the ocean. When water is drawn in, fish and larvae are trapped and killed. And the discharged water has a higher salt concentration, which could upset the ocean's balance. Long Beach is working on those problems too at a second pilot project. They're digging a trench into the ocean floor to bury the intake pipes, so water will be drawn in through sand to prevent marine life from being harmed. If it works, and if they can convince the politicians, Wattier believes he could have a plant up and running, supplying 15% of Long Beach water within 7 years.
We see that the reliability of our imported supplies is getting less and less over time, and we need to find ways like this to be more locally self-reliant.
San Diego County, the end of the water line. Every drop of water they use here is imported, and the water wars have begun. When we return, on one side, private enterprise trying to desalinate water for a profit. On the other side, environmentalists fighting to stop desalination. This is the desalination battleground, the beach town of Carlsbad, just up the road from San Diego. The first large-scale plant on the California coast is set to be built here, beside a power plant that already draws in ocean water for cooling. The desalination plant will use the same intake pipes. It was all part of the sales pitch from the company, Poseidon Resources.
California is home to 36 million residents and one of the world's most vibrant and diversified economies.
For Poseidon, it all seems so simple. After all, they're helping to solve the water problem. The company has already pre-sold all the water it can produce. But it was a hard sell to convince local authorities to approve such a big development on the protected coastline.
The Carlsbad Desalination Project is a visionary step towards solving that problem for generations to come.
For 8 years, Jessica Jones has worked at Poseidon as part of the team that sold the project.
Desalination will help because we are using water from the Pacific Ocean, which is an endless reservoir to our west, and the project here in San Diego County will supply 50 million gallons per day, which is about enough water to serve 300,000 residents. And it's a local supply that is drought-proof.
But ask local surfers if it's a simple thing to take drinking water from the sea, and you will get another answer. The Surfriders Foundation is fighting to stop the desalination project. Julia Chun is with the San Diego chapter.
Here in California, we have a tendency to look for quick fixes, and so we'll do something, but then that fix soon becomes a problem. It's really easy to buy into the fact that San Diego needs water, so here's a solution, take it, and they call it an endless supply of water. Well, you're not looking at the energy concerns, you're not looking what it does to marine life long term.
Poseidon has managed to convince the authorities that they can make up for the loss of fish and larvae that will be killed by the intake pipe.
We will be mitigating that intake through restoring and enhancing 37 acres of marine habitat here in San Diego County.
Poseidon has set up a tiny pilot system to demonstrate its process, but the future plant will be 1,000 times bigger than this, and that means tons of greenhouse gas emissions. The company says it will use the most efficient technology and will try to offset the emissions. Those assurances are not enough for surfriders. They've launched a court action in a final effort to stop the plant until newer technology can be developed that doesn't need all those environmental compensations.
They say, well, this is the largest plant of this size to be built in the Western Hemisphere. You know, you can't ask too much. Let us get out there and try it. And to us, that means it makes even more sense. Well, let's take do some planning now before you go build this, $300 million project and don't really know what we're doing.
The climate in California cannot wait any longer. The public agencies that we've become partners with are pushing this project as hard as they can because every day when they serve their customers, they see the need for this project. They see the rates going up for imported water, they see the supply going down, and they're scared.
Desalination, even at its most aggressive, still won't supply enough water for this increasingly dry state. Orange County. This is a place that has dared to try something most water officials are afraid to even think about. Orange County has started turning sewage water into drinking water. From his office in the state capitol, Joe Grindstaff says, get used to it.
It's actually using it to replenish groundwater and for future drinking water supply. So I think we're going to be doing more and more of those kinds of things.
People call that toilet to tap.
Yes, they do. And I'll quote an LA Times editorial, get over it. All the water in this world has been reused many times. And our task is not to prevent us from doing that. Our task is to make sure that it's really the highest quality possible.
As droughts in the south persist and California gets even drier, water is something they will always have to fight for.
Water is going to become the new gold. I think it's going to be on everybody's minds. I think the reality is just going to force us to have to look at other water options, and I just hope that we'll do it in a sustainable fashion.
Back up at the Delta, Rita Schmitz-Sudman lives with the dread that most Californians try not to think about. She knows the water crisis is upon them, and yet they continue building and irrigating and growing. and at the same time blocking potential solutions at every turn. Something has to give.
We have to be realistic about our future. It's going to take a lot of things. There is no silver bullet for solving California's water problem. There will be many, many ways. It's like your portfolio. You have to diversify.
And they'll need every strategy they can think of to keep the water pumping where nature never intended it to go. Kelly Crow, CBC News, California.